I warned you in yesterday's video that Bitcoin may very well correct. And look at us now, crashing right back down. First, we looked at how when the ETF inflows exceeded $400 million, it usually means that we are at a local top for Bitcoin. Then we started looking at the fear and greed index. We were in a greedy zone. And then we went ahead and looked at some of the charts. We were at the top of this 50 to 70K range. Let's roll the clips. So according to this chart right here, there is a very clear pattern when it comes to ETF inflows and how they actually affect the price of Bitcoin. Long term, they may very well support the price of Bitcoin. However, the days where the ETF inflows were more than $400 million marked the top in most cases. Then, if we go ahead and look at the other part of the video, we're still at the top of this range, and we've been trying to push this range, but this isn't new. It's happened several times before. So would getting rejected really surprise you that much? And there you have it. We spoke about how being at the top of that range would probably mean that we would struggle and see some downside movement from Bitcoin. And that is exactly what happened. If we go back to the chart here, we can see that we got rejected at exactly $69,500. And this rejection was indeed expected. See, most of your crypto influencers will draw this channel without including the wicks in and out of the channel. Aside from this one right here, which is clearly an outlier, when I drew this channel, I decided to include the wicks. Now you can see that if we drew it with the wicks, we did not go out of this channel and we did not break through yet. And it's very obvious now that we see this rejection that it was indeed a massive area of rejection. Again, for bullish continuation, we must see the price of Bitcoin break out of this range, hold it as support, and then it can break free towards all-time highs. Until then, unfortunately, we will be stuck in this range. Perhaps this is a period of consolidation before we break out, but for the time being and for the short term, I am bearish on the price of Bitcoin. Now, let's have a look at some of the liquidation heat maps. So if we have a look on CoinGlass here, we can see that Bitcoin successfully came down and took all of this liquidation at the lower levels. On Twitter, I said that if Bitcoin would correct, it would be at the top of this range. And so it did. So if you want faster, real-time updates, make sure to follow me on Twitter, where I am posting over 10 times per day, following the market and guiding you through it. On the flip side, $11 billion worth of shorts will get liquidated if Bitcoin hits $70,300. If we go back to this range, we are now below $67,000, having topped at $69,500. But the market has a way of humbling us all, and I would not be surprised if at some point Bitcoin goes up and grabs all that liquidity at the $70,300 mark. It would really have to be a massive move because we have yet to even touch the $70,000 mark since the end of July. Another chart here suggests that there is a crazy move ahead of us. The Bitcoin CME futures open interest chart here shows that we are at all-time highs with over $12 billion in open interest. Usually when the open interest is this high, it can cause both bulls and bears to get sufficiently wrecked. So you need to be careful in this market. Now, let's look at some of the higher time frame and more positive stuff. So first of all, Bitcoin has clearly broken free from this monthly bull pennant, but it also bounced off of the previous resistance, which has now turned into support. In the previous video and in this one, I told you that once that resistance is turned into support, it's an extremely bullish sign. Now, this pennant that's drawn here is a little bit different than the channel that I was showing, which indicates that we're not actually outside of that channel yet. But in this case, it would suggest a breakout if you're following this pattern here. Another piece of more positive news would be that Japan is to cut Bitcoin and crypto taxes from 55% to 20% if the Democratic Party of the People wins the election. So that is very positive news for Bitcoin. Long term, it's very clear that Bitcoin will only grow bigger and bigger and bigger. But how can I be so bullish for the long term while being bearish in the short term? Well, for three main reasons. First of all, the increased global adoption, the institutional investment into Bitcoin, as well as more and more favorable regulatory shifts in the market. Now, I've been in the crypto industry for over 5 years, and while I always thought that Bitcoin at some point would be discussed in politics, I didn't think it would happen so soon. Adoption is continuing, Bitcoin is growing, and it's very much here to stay, despite some bearish short-term price action. Look, it's important to not just be blindly bullish on Bitcoin. The signs of a correction were here. First of all, the ETF inflows surpassing $400 million, and I believe they actually surpassed over $1 billion, were a sure signal of at least a local top. Then we had to consider that we are indeed at a heavy resistance point. As I mentioned earlier, charts can be drawn differently, but it was very clear that this level, in particular the 70K level, which we have not touched yet since the end of July, was going to prove to be heavy resistance. And then the liquidation levels. There were a lot of liquidations at the 67.5K mark. We are now well below that at 66.9K. The question is, how much lower will we go before we make our long-awaited move to all-time highs? Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.